Hello, I'm Dave Feinlieb, and this is Beyond the Shelf. This show is an open exploration of the people and process behind e-commerce. Through conversations with innovators in the space, we learn the stories of these leaders and their strategies for e-commerce success. You can join our mailing list and learn more about how we're helping leading brands and retailers like PepsiCo and Instacart personalize creative at scale at itsrapid.ai. My guest on today's show is Alex Crowe. Alex is Global Vice President of Omnichannel Strategy at Criteo. Criteo helps advertisers, retailers, and publishers activate and monetize audiences everywhere shoppable moments happen. Previously, Alex was head of media partnerships at Asda. We discuss Alex's background in the space, his experience at Asda, and the evolving nature of retail media. Please enjoy my conversation with Alex Crowe. Alex, so great to see you.
Always a pleasure, Dave.
Well, take us back, would you? How'd you get your start in the space?
You see, I'm not like so many newbies to the retail media space. There was not like this divine inspiration or bright light from above. It was very much kind of where I started and where I grew up, and to some extent, most of, if not all, that I've ever known. So yeah, I at university I did a marketing degree. As part of that, there was a placement working at a kind of local retailer, so Dolan and Aitchison, so not big opticians in the UK at the time. So cut my teeth working for those wonderful people. And then everything prior to Criteo has all been kind of retailer centric roles. So it's, whether it's kind of trade marketing teams, in the media teams, working in the e-commerce teams, or as you know, kind of monetization roles, running Asda's media monetization program. That's kind of how it all started, and where it has continued up until into my latest role here at Criteo.
Well, so great. Now, this retail media, I think we've heard a little bit about it. Tell us what's going on. It's obviously a huge space and a amazing growth and investment opportunity.
Yeah, look, I think it's you've got to remember, I'm old enough to remember when retail media was definitely the lesser cousin. So it's a great time to be involved in the retail media space. But I think what's going on with it. I think it's been trailblazed by the Amazons and to a lesser extent Walmart and those wonderful people. I think Amazon published $37 billion in monetization revenue. I think Walmart's 30% growth year on year. So there's some big numbers there, and there's a lot of industry excitement that you and I are always privy to and listening to. So if I kind of then dial that right back to a retailer world, because I will keep doing that because that's my bread and butter. There's a lot of cost pressures on retailers at the minute, whether that's the cost price increases coming through or shrinkflation and others. But then obviously there's massive pressures on cost to serve if you think about energy prices, people costs. So if you're a retailer, your aspiration is to kind of try and keep prices low for your consumers. So I think what you've got this massive growth opportunity that people are seeing. You've got inflationary pressures, and then finally you've got the kind of the cookie deprecation. I think everyone's clear on the value of first-party data, but I think that a lot of retailers certainly saw their addressable market increase significantly over COVID, which means that they're in a space where they've got this rich first-party asset as well. So those three things together, you're probably a retailer whose gross margin is sub 40%, your EBITDA maybe 5 to 12%. And you're seeing retail media as this incremental revenue source that offers, 70 to 90% for on-site, 60 to 80% in the physical environment, 20 to 40% off-site. You're kind of keen to get your fair share of that kind of high margin net new opportunity. And that is probably, there's the win-win-win. So everybody feels like there's something in it for them.
Now, you spent a number of years at Asda. Tell us a little about that. You're heading up media partnerships. What does that involve, and how has it changed in the last decade?
Yeah, look, I mean, media partnerships, I did that for 7 years. So, a long old time to be running that team. But that was all about media monetization. So that was how, as a retailer, we have our own media proposition, how we leverage our first party data to essentially target media and use and report success. And then obviously the content that goes on to that environment. So, when I started, it was very much all trade marketing centric. So it was all about, as a retailer, we've negotiated X% of cost of goods sold to come into marketing. Can you be a home for that? Be a home for our joint business plan marketing spend? And the assets themselves were, disparate. they were made up by retailers as a route to kind of support this. And you think about where the industry is going and has been going probably over the last 10 years or so, is you're seeing probably four things. One is the assets are evolving, so they're becoming more akin to those that you would normally recognize and buy through media buying agencies. So retailers are cottoning on to that as a great opportunity. The technology is improving. When I started, we were running a £40 million business unit way back when off Excel spreadsheets. So, the technology, whether that's, in order management, whether that's in CRM, whether that's in ad serving and SSP based technology, a lot of retailers, if I tell you when I started Asda, we were putting adverts straight onto the content management system. They were staying there for a week, and they weren't evolving. So it was very, very different. So you've got the assets are evolving, the technology is improving. Then you've got obviously the kind of data and AI discussion, which I think speaks for itself. But it's our ability to target and understand consumers so that we can put better relevant content in front of them, getting on. And then finally the demand sources. So like I said, we were doing trade marketing, joint business plan, cash, but actually over the time that I was at Asda, that evolved massively. So you're unlocking different sources of demand. You're understanding what success looks like for different peoples in different organizations or different agencies. So a lot of change, a lot of moving parts. It's a fast moving industry in so much it's gone on such a change curve in such a short period of time. And I think rightly or wrongly, there's a glare, from Amazon and such publishing such massive growth. So the people in those seats that, I was lucky enough to have for a period of time are sitting there going, there's pressure internally to kind of emulate that growth and that opportunity. But also there's a lot of complexity around those areas and how they fit it all together to build a proposition. Really exciting, but it's lots of fun, lots of sleepless nights for sure.
A lot going on, and I like the way you talked about it. It's not, it's the ad formats, it's the tech, it's the data. So there's a lot lot to stay abreast of, but a lot you can do there as well, which is great. Now you're at Criteo. Now you've got this global view, head of omnichannel strategy. Talk to us about that. What are you seeing at leading retailers and brands? You've got kind of this industry-wide view, which is really neat.
Yeah, what's great about it is I get the pleasure of seeing an ad tech business's view on it, and I also get the pleasure of seeing the retailer's view. And being from that world, you feel the opportunities. But look, I think what we're seeing is retailers are acting more and more like media owners. And what you're then seeing is different brands are starting to look at all the ways in which they think that retailers can support them in meeting whatever their goals are. I do perhaps take exception to some people in the industry where they talk about, the fact that why aren't retailers like publishers? And I'll be really clear as a retailer, or I will sit there and say, I don't think that retailers will ever truly be like publishers, because their number one objective is kind of serving the customer and helping the customer in the goal of buying products, which is very different to that of a publisher, which is, eyeballs and attention. And so I don't think you're going to ever get that full kind of retailers becoming publishers. But I think, you're seeing some great work in how the industry is coming together through standardization. And I think that's going to help drive scale into the industry, which I think is really important. But then you've just got each retailer having their own spin on what they want to be excellent or how they want to differentiate. And, it does come back to those kind of four or five, routes I talked about previously, whether it's they're going to really, leverage that first party data and they're going to make data key to what they're doing, or or some of them are digital only, and they're focused on full funnel digital operations and how they can use their audiences in other people's media. Whereas others are, certainly, I think, and it's different by region. I think it's really interesting. It's kind of like APAC is different to EMEA, which is different to the US. So different challenges, all very real present challenges. A lot of it kind of systemic of what's happened before it and how different markets have dealt with the different challenges, but all really exciting. It's exciting to see all these things and try and put your brain to how you can help support the guys and girls in the seats that are running these things, because it's exciting for them as well, and challenging.
And challenging. I love it. It's such a great, and it's truly a global perspective. So it's really great. When we think about things like we've got in store, we've got online, we've a lot of different channels now. You've shared with me something I've been really impressed by, which is this vision for kind of end to end, from buying, and we've got planning, we've got the content and the media assets themselves, the creation of those. Spend a minute and talk us through that long-term idea, that long-term vision.
My view on it is that retail media, rightly or wrongly, is still very much seen as a route to delivering performance for most advertisers. I think Criteo and the work that we're doing is we're very much focused on that kind of full funnel communication. So it's kind of performance through your sponsored products, it's your on-site display, and then it's your off-site. But the methodology is kind of different, and I think that this is really important. Is that our approach is very much coming away from this multi-channel approach, which is kind of disconnected channels that are completely siloed, and each channel trying to maximize the interactions that they deliver in that channel, to more of a kind of interconnected approach. So actually, and I should say omnichannel because that's the job title, so it's a good plug for why I'm thinking the way I'm thinking. But it's about the fact that David, if you're off-site, if you're on-site in a browse mode, or if you're in the product, you're browsing, or you're in that kind of search phase, you're still David. And I think that actually the more and more we can have interconnected channels, especially for retail, which, to the point I've made earlier, the goal of retail is, yes, to optimize their monetization goals, but they want to have a great relationships with their customers, because the relationships with their customers will drive trips, i.e. people coming back, whether that's the physical or the digital environment, and it'll drive basket spend. So you want to have relevant customer communications. And I see the only way that you really do that properly is a kind of omni-channel approach, which is the customer's the center. And then what you're doing is your media touch points are working interconnected around that customer to deliver a really relevant joined up message. So that's Criteo's goal. I think, and as you know, we acquired a business called Brand Crush earlier this year. That is very much all about where Criteo has been, the market leader, I think it's fair to say, in the digital side of retail media. What Brand Crush bring to us is that opportunity to leverage the in-store environment. And I think, we all know that for most retailers, they've got bigger audiences there, and the bigger participation of their sales is operating in that physical world. So if we kind of play forward the omni-channel view, it's customer at the center, whether they're in a physical environment or a digital environment, whether they're in a retailer's domain or outside of a retailer's domain. How are we having relevant customer communication with them? And then, what's really important with that is you can measure effectively an attribute performance. Because I think if you're operating in a siloed approach, it's very difficult to actually measure the success, because it's a little bit like the seance cup where everyone's got a finger on it, pushing it towards the goal, but then all of them are claiming the goal, or performance media might be claiming the goal because they're the last touch. And I think we have to, acknowledge the strengths and the opportunities of all of the media channels, of how they all collectively, impact that consumer feeling about a brand or the journey that a consumer's on. And then be honest about how that all comes together, because I think that's how we learn more and how we improve. So yeah, that's our tack on it, or my tack on it.
Well, Alex, tell us a little about creative. Obviously, a space that we're passionate about here at It's Rapid. What role does display and the assets and the creative part play in this retail media space?
Retailers, brands, agencies alike, they're taking data so very seriously, and they understand and appreciate its value, whether it's to target or to measure activation. I think if I go back to the customer, what the only difference a customer actually sees is what they're actually consuming from a media perspective or the content. So a similar level of focus and attention should be paid towards the actual interaction that you're having with the customer. So I think creative is of massive importance. I think especially when you kind of pull it back to that omni-channel style of communication as opposed to kind of multi-channel approaches. So and I think then you kind of get into some really interesting topics about, right, well, what's the role of each media channel? Whether it's in the what part of the funnel, or whether it's a digital channel, or whether it's a physical channel, because we know physical channels, even though you can attribute performance after using loyalty card data and such, the targeting's more of a one-to-many approach. So, but you've got to think about the different media, you've got to think about the different roles of it, and then think about the customer and how do you get that really relevant customer communication. And I think that creative has got to be the kind of fabric that brings that all together, especially if you want to elicit those conversations that I've talked about previously.
So when you have the creative and you are thinking about, as a brand, how do I invest or how much do I invest in online and in store? I've physical, I've got display ads, I've got video, I have TV now, I have seemingly a huge number of channels. Maybe some guidelines or some framework for how to think about that mix.
Look, I'm always mindful of advising brands or advising advertisers, or and being very specific on media mix, because like I've said, it's very different by different geos, it's very different by different product verticals, and it's different by customer. But I keep coming back to that omni-channel approach versus multi-channel approach, and actually by having a view of all of the different media touch points, having a view of the customer journey, that's going to help us form better modeling about how we best split our budgets. When we target the budgets by different media type, who we target them to, and when, if it's more of a physical environment. And I think the only bit I'd throw into that, if we kind of say the approach that we're taking is that omni-channel approach to media supply, I think it's then how do you kind of have a similar yet equilibrium approach to the demand side? So, we know that different demand sources can be quite siloed, whether it's, I've got my budget in certain channels or in performance budgets or in trade marketing budgets. I think that how we as a collective group kind of break down more of those silos, think about the customer at the center, and then the media touch points all operate around that. I think that will promote the customer communication, and conversations, as opposed to kind of silo based reach and frequency of the same content all the way along.
I love it. Now, before I talk about where things are headed, I want to ask you one more question from your ASDA days. I remember looking at some specs of all these different formats. You've got the ads that go on the site. You've got the end caps. You've got the video modules. You like so much you can do. And I guess when you're thinking about how to invest, maybe one of the takeaways I'm hearing is, how can I be consistent across the funnel, but also across all these different formats? Is that the right way to think about it?
Absolutely. I think the main thing is having a view of all of your media touch points, and then correctly attributing the same kind of modeling about how you look at the performance. And again, back to that point about knowing the role of the media. So, you know, if I was on the retailer side, I took great pleasure in looking at every single brief that was coming in from every single brand, mapping each one back up to a product category and to a product vertical, looking at the different content types we put on there, because obviously it was all mapped in the brand crush-esque technology. That's how we would do it. So you kind of then start looking at, right, well, how does which media works best for which objective, which content works best for which objective, how does this map to ROAS and fill rates? And and if you're an advertiser, you're constantly thinking, well, what channels, who to target, where, what medium. I think, look, my overarching view, though, and this is quite an interesting one, and it might be quite controversial, but I like a bit of controversy every now and again, is that you're going to, as a retailer, derive competitive advantage if your comms is leveraging SKU based approach as opposed to it being that classical audience based approach. So a couple of reasons, obviously I worked on a network that was operated like that, but if you operate centered in the kind of SKU, then you have this ability to include things like call to actions, like prices and buy in your communication, which always drives better outcomes than fully kind of branded content or otherwise. I think, from a customer satisfaction perspective, if you're rooted in the SKU, your content is linked to your merchandising. So, if I think about at a retailer, local stores fulfill different home delivery. So, different SKUs aren't available in different stores. So if you're rooted in the SKU, you can make sure that it's merchandised in the store that's picking it, and you can make sure that, that it's in stock. Simple things, but massive when it comes to kind of like bottom of the funnel media communications. And I think that if you can then bring together the audience targeting approach, the SKU based approach, and look at affinities. So, I might like fresh produce, and I might want the best fresh produce and the freshest, best meats and fish. Ironically, I'm a vegetarian, so that probably doesn't work, but you kind of get the idea. But I have two tiny humans, which I'm very proud of. Now, the thing is, they like fish fingers, bird's eye potato waffles and baked beans. Now, the fact of the matter is that whether that's the own label version, the opening price point version, that doesn't bother me one jot, because quite frankly, they're not likely to taste the difference, as it were. So if you start to understand, if everything's rooted in the SKU and advertisers know the audience they want to target, I think there's a real nice job that we can all do in mapping audiences to SKUs, understanding the affinities between the two in a kind of predictive way. That's how I think that there's some real nice wins and opportunities when you think about retail media networks and how they develop, how they're supporting brands in what they're doing. And some of them are doing really nice work in this already. But I think that's being rooted in the SKU is really, really important for this channel, as opposed to this kind of audience approach without really understanding the kind of the detail and the challenging operations of a retailer in a retail media environment.
What a great insight. So not necessarily easy to do the SKU level creative and the market level or event level creative, but really powerful if you can do it.
Yeah, I mean, the performance stats were phenomenal when we looked at the two differences, and obviously that was in the operator that I operated in. But if it worked there, I'd be highly surprised if it was demonstrably different if you operate elsewhere. So it is a pain, it is a challenge, it adds complexity, but you know, having fully branded content that's quite disruptive to a customer journey at certainly on at the mid to bottom of the funnel, versus having perhaps the same branding but having the appropriate call to action, it feeling a bit more native, and it being linked to products that are in stock and that are merchandise that are relevant for the customer. The return gains are a lot higher if you kind of operate in that way than an audience based front end. Doesn't matter who the end consumer is and if it's in stock.
It's great. I always learn so much when we chat, so I am incredibly appreciative. Well, let me ask you one more question here. So we've kind of covered some history. We've talked about some formats and capabilities. Looking ahead now to the next couple of months, maybe, or next couple of years, things are moving so quickly. What's on the horizon? What are you seeing in some of your conversations with brands and retailers?
If you said to me, if it was up to me and the three things I would focus on, I'd be, drive scale through standards. How do you bring the physical environment back into play? Because I think that we know that audiences and performance gains are there, and then scale your offsite, which is where most of us are spending most of our time. And why would you not want to talk to most of us?
Well, Alex, it's been a pleasure. Let me ask you a couple of fun questions before we wrap up here. First off, Thinking about people who have inspired you, is there someone in your professional life who's inspired you, or who maybe you've learned from over the years?
Yeah, I always think that there's kind of two things, isn't there? There's what we do and there's how we do it. So I think there's too many to list of people that have taught me new things or made me think in a different way. I think how we do it, I kind of keep coming back to that, the 7 habits of highly effective people. And I had a boss who was very made this very real. His name was Don Birch, real good guy, and he definitely got my mind working in a different way, which was kind of less of this how do we win, how do we drive, how do we innovate, and more of this, right, well, how do we bring everybody on the journey, and how do you think you're saying this, but what are you actually saying, or how can this be interpreted? So he was very supportive, and helped me think in a very different way. So there you go, that's my person.
That's a good one. I love it. And obviously, we all spend a lot of time at work, but hobbies outside of friends and family.
I was going to say, yeah, outside of work, friends, and family, you're kind of
I know
we're
those are the,
talking
and
about
especially
a fraction of a fraction
with
here, my
kids,
friend.
where does the time go? But
Yeah, quite. Yeah, look, I mean, I enjoy a bit of sport. I'm not going to lie. So whether it's more watching than playing these days, unfortunately. But yeah, now if it is the physical it's out in the doing more walks. So I went and did the Yorkshire Three Peaks a couple of weekends ago, which it's 25, 26 miles of fun and three peaks, which I think it's the third or fourth time I've done it, and the time's not getting much worse, but the recovery time is demonstrably longer for sure.
the tough part. But that is cool. I like that. That's amazing. I'm big into the outdoors myself, so I love it. Well, Alex, as I said, it's been a pleasure. If people would like to find you online, what's the best way for them to find you or reach you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's normally the way to go, isn't it? So yeah, let's stick with the stock answer of LinkedIn without giving phone numbers and emails away, and then me being, for your monstrous following here, Dave. I've got to be mindful that
Yeah,
I don't want to be
exactly.
inundated.
Exactly. All right. Well, I love it. I think my big takeaway is really this customer centric, and kind of everything comes from there. All these different ways of working together, and where we're headed. But I think that's such a great insight. So, Alex, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
God bless, Dave.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard, please visit our website at itsrapid.ai, where you can find out more about how we're helping leading brands like PepsiCo save thousands of hours a year when it comes to retail media and digital shelf content creation. And don't forget to subscribe to hear more great episodes of Beyond the Shelf. See you next time.